about 6 hours yesterday fixing your computer for you, upgrading it for you, spent about $130 on software. And today, I run across a post on your Facebook page that you didn't think I'd be able to see. So since you want to hide it from everyone, I'm going to share it with everybody. This is called To My Parents, by the way. To my parents, I'm not your damn slave. It's not my responsibility to clean up your shit. We have a cleaning lady for a reason. Her name is Linda, not Hannah. If you want coffee, get off your ass and make it yourself. If you want a garden, shovel the fertilizer yourself. Don't sit back on your ass and watch me do it. If you walk in the house and get mud all over the floor that I just cleaned, be my guest. But clean it up after you're done getting shit everywhere. I'm tired of picking up after you. You tell me at least once a day that I need to get a job. And I love this part. You could just pay me for all the shit that I do around the house. Seriously? Are you kidding me? I'll get that in a minute. Every day when I get home from school, I have to do dishes, clean the countertops, all the floors, make all the beds, do the laundry, and get the trash. I'm not even going to mention all the work I do around your clinic. And if I don't do all that every day, I get grounded. You know how hard it is to keep up with chores and schoolwork? It's freaking crazy. I go to sleep at 10 every night because I'm too tired to stay up any longer and do anything else. I have to get up at 5 in the morning to get ready for school. On the weekends, I have to sleep with my door locked so my little brother won't come get me up at 6. That part's true. This is all true. This is what she said. And I'm tired of this bullshit. Next time I have to pour a cup of coffee, I'm gonna flip shit. I have no idea how I have a life. I'm gonna hate to see the day when you get too old to wipe your ass and you call me asking for help. I won't be there. Signed, your pissed kid, Hannah. I'm gonna address a couple of these. We have a lady that cleans the house for us as a favor to trade off some services. She is not, and you will never again refer to her as the cleaning lady. That lady works harder in one day than you ever have in your life. Pay you for the chores, seriously? Pay you for chores that you're supposed to do around the house. You come home from school, you have a list of chores that are on the wall because you can't remember them if you don't. They are sweep the living room and kitchen floor, which total will take you about 3 minutes. If the countertops are dirty, wipe them down, which takes about a minute. If the dishwasher's full and been run, empty it and put the dishes away. If it's not, just be sure all the glasses and stuff are in the dishwasher. If you have any laundry of your own, do it. And if your bed is unmade, do it. You don't have to do my laundry. You don't have to make my bed. You don't have to make the guest bed. You have to make your own bed. Once a month or so, I guess you probably have to make the guest bed. But pay you for chores? Are you out of your mind? You are 15 going on 16 years old. You want things for your laptop, you want a new battery, you want a new cord, you want a new camera, you want a new phone, you want a new iPod, but you won't get off your lazy ass to even look for a job. The only job that you've applied to is the one I made you apply to because I got the application for you. And you've been too lazy to even carry that back. When I was your age, I moved out of the house, lived on my own, went to college while in high school, worked 2 jobs, was a volunteer fireman, and still went to school. Your responsibilities include waking up on time and getting on the bus. That's the end of your responsibility each day. You don't have that hard a life, but you're about to. I warned you months ago about what would happen if you did something like this on Facebook again. The last time you were grounded, and quite frankly, I've forgotten now, but it was for something fairly childish and stupid. We took away the computer, that kind of thing. No cell phone, no Facebook. And I told you if it ever happened again, that it'd be a lot worse. And I was really close that day to putting a bullet through your laptop. Now, this time, I just spent all day yesterday, blew half my day upgrading your laptop, putting new software on it, spend about $130 in software to get everything, the way that you want to have it for school. You don't have to worry about buying a new laptop battery. You don't have to worry about buying a new.
Just give me a moment, because I'm actually going to have to go back to the edit function and to try to find where we were. I don't know what happened there, but we're having a little fun this morning. Unfortunately, I can't find a way of forwarding to where we were. Just give me a moment. I'm sorry about this.
Good afternoon. It's February 7th, 2012. This is from my daughter, Hannah.
I'll just turn the sound down to... No. Okay, I'll give up on that. I don't have to watch that whole thing again. We're coming to the end of the video clip, but what he does next is what concerns me the most. He takes, this is Texas of course, so of course he's carrying a gun, and he takes his Magnum 45, talks about the type of bullets he's using and how his daughter's going to have to pay for the bullets because they're $1 each. And then he puts 8 rounds into the computer. And he tells her that she won't get to use a computer again. She'll be lucky if she uses it when she goes to college. And that's how he said he's going to teach her a lesson. We'll come back to that and talk about that style of parenting. So what is the issue then? What is the issue for us? Well, the context in which we do our parenting in Australia are the mental health issues that our young people suffer from, which evidence seems to be telling us are getting worse. Have a look at this. This was a survey conducted. 18,000 young people responded, and when we say young people, this is ages 15 to 19, responded to the survey. This is done by Wesley Central Mission, and they do this every year. It's a very reliable survey of youth mental health in Australia. The number 2 concern of young people is their mental health challenges. When asked, what is your most pressing challenge, almost 28% of young people said, my mental health. Only eclipsed by school problems and dealing with school and everything that's a part of this. The psychological distress in young people, and there are certain criteria that they use for measuring psychological distress. But can you see what's happened? And if you think this is just a result of COVID, think again. 2012, well before COVID, 18.6% of young people reported significant psychological distress. In just 8 years, from 2012 to 2020, that has risen to 26.6%. And that was just before COVID hit. So you can see the trend. And you can extrapolate where that might be in 10 years, in another 10 years, or where that might be in another 20 years if this trend continues. And might I add, this is despite all of the mental health interventions that we have now that we didn't have 30 or 40 years ago, that we certainly didn't have when I was a kid at school. This is despite the school counsellors, despite adolescent mental health centres. The mental health of our young people in Australia is not a pretty picture. And to give you another picture of it, and this is amongst females. Mental health issues are generally more prominent with females. Similar trend with males, but it's very marked there in females, the amount of distress. 2 out of 5 in 2020. 2 out of 5 reporting psychological distress. This is probably going to be a little harder for you to see, but the lower lines are 2014, 2015, and the higher lines indicating higher frequency, higher levels of anxiety are the 2017 to 2018, and they are done for men and women. The men are in blue. But you can see in both cases it's risen. And we're only talking the difference of a few years. Data collected in 2014, 2015 versus data collected in 2017, 2018. And you can see a marked trend in that age group. Good news is that anxiety does tend to get better as you get older. There's not much good about getting old, I've decided, but that's one thing. Your anxiety and depression tends to get better. We see a similar picture with depression. Again, if you look at the sort of 15 age group early on, again you can see the increase that has occurred between the 2 bluish lines down the bottom and the two brown lines at the top. The lower one being 2014, 2015, the higher one being 2017, 2018. Well, why is parenting such a tricky business? Why is it so tricky? Let me suggest some things to you. Our default mode is to do what our parents did with no consideration of the cultural and societal changes that have occurred since we were children. The way that many of us were parented may have worked in that time, or it may not have, and we've spent years in therapy trying to undo that. But just because it worked 30 years ago does not mean it's going to work today, because society has changed. And our parenting styles need to adopt to the changes in society that change the reactions of our young people and societal expectations. I'm not saying we simply go with the culture. I'm not saying we simply go with what everybody else is doing. I'm not saying that we simply go with the world, if you want to use a Christian type of term. But what I'm saying is we need to be aware of the influences of society, the expectations of our young people, what their needs are now compared to what my needs were when I was a kid. Our kids' reactions push our buttons due to our unresolved stuff. How many of you, as that father was reading out the letter, for the bad language, I apologise for that, how many of you found yourself getting quite annoyed and maybe a bit angry at this very impertinent 15, almost 16-year-old kid? Put your hand up if you went, that is really bad, started getting annoyed. I do when I watch it. Yeah, some of you, just a few of you. The rest of you, yeah. She's rude, she's disrespectful, she's ungrateful, all of those things. And of course we get tired and stressed. So not only do we have a default mode that is to parent in the way that our parents parented, which may not work quite so well anymore, our kids' reactions push our buttons due to our unresolved stuff, the baggage that we bring, and we get tired and stressed. And we've got very heavy competition for our parenting. My father decided when we were kids that a TV was going to be a bad influence. So we grew up without a TV. I don't think we particularly suffered because we didn't have a TV. It's really interesting though that I came home from Avondale and I looked in the lounge room and all the kids had left and I said, "Dad, what's this?" Yeah. I said, "TV? What's that doing?" You know? He said, "Oh, I just watched the ABC News, that's all." We said, "Yeah, right, okay." But now, it's not TV that we're so worried about, is it, with our kids? It's all the stuff they can access on social media. It's what happens on their phones. I found when I was a school counsellor that bullying didn't stop at 3:15 anymore when the bell rang. That bullying could go 24/7. And the kids would get abusive text messages at 3 in the morning and you say, well, they just need to change their phone number. Well, newsflash, kids don't know how to spell the word confidentiality, let alone do it. So I had a kid who would keep changing her phone number. Within a few days, it was around the school again. Because one of her friends who vowed and declared she wouldn't share it, obviously shared it with somebody who shared it, and yeah, and the unwanted behaviour continued. What are the key elements of emotional health? If there is a problem with emotional well-being with our kids, and I would argue that there is, and by the way, I don't know whether you've ever heard this, but have you ever heard people say, kids have it so easy today? Have you heard that? I've spent much of my life working with young people, and I still am working with young people at Avondale. Most of my students are undergraduate students. My youngest student is 17. So I'm still working with young people. Let me tell you, they have a lot more conveniences, but that doesn't make life easy. And I would argue that life is harder for our kids than it's ever been. Simply because you have the latest iPhone does not make your life easy. It just means you have a convenience, that's all. But now the choices our kids have to make, the pressures that they are under, the bombardment from so many unhelpful sources is worse than it's ever been. The devil is doing a number on our kids. There is no question about it in my mind. The rubbish that is being fed. Why is it that anorexia nervosa is a reasonably modern disease? Didn't really hear much about anorexia nervosa 60 or 70 years ago. Why? Because girls are bombarded with pictures of what they ought to look like and then become obsessed with that, leading to an eating disorder. What are the key elements of emotional health? Healthy and realistic view of who we are. Being in touch with our emotions. Being able to contain emotions when necessary. And being in touch with the emotions of others. They are the things that define emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman first wrote his book in 1998 about emotional intelligence and suggested perhaps it was as important as IQ. The intellectual quotient was, he suggested, no more important than the emotional quotient. In other words, the emotional intelligence, EQ. What were the messages about emotions in your family? What were you told about emotions? Let me talk to you for a minute. Let's make this just a tad interactive. What were you told about emotions? What emotions were not okay in your family? Yeah? Sorry? Yeah. Sorry? Boys don't cry. How many of you grew up with that? Boys don't cry. Crying is one of the healthiest things that we do, whether we're men or whether we're women. It's been shown to be incredibly healthy. Do you know that when you cry, the tears actually have an anesthetic effect, and the emotional pain actually decreases. You can actually measure that. Isn't that incredible?
That's good.
It actually has an anesthetic effect. It just feels that little bit better. That's why when someone cries for an hour, they feel a little better. That's not just imagined. That's real.
Yeah.
Because the body has done what the good Lord designed that it should be. It's done a little bit of self-soothing. What other messages did you get about emotions in your family? Yeah, you're going to have to really shout. Yeah, oh, here we go. We have a mic coming your way. Morning, Karina.
Check,
Lovely
check,
to see
check.
you. See, I can see you up the back there. Lovely to see you.
Not allowed to be angry or frustrated.
Yeah, not allowed to be angry or frustrated, yeah? In my family, the rule was an interesting one. We couldn't get angry and frustrated, but my father could. Only my father could get angry, but as kids, we certainly couldn't. And nor could my mother, but my father could. Yeah,
If we found something hard or we were reacting about something, then we would often be told, stop being so silly.
yes. So minimizing of emotion, you're just being silly. But you know, when a 5-year-old kid loses their doll, there's nothing silly about that. Yeah, that is serious for a 5-year-old kid. And as parents, when we minimize that emotion, we're really saying is your emotions and feelings don't matter that much.
In our church community, I'm a pastor, so I'm a bit sensitive to this. We're told and taught that emotions couldn't be trusted.
Emotions couldn't be trusted.
It's all
yeah.
part of the heart, you can't trust them.
You can't trust emotions, yeah. I remember a lecturer when I did theology at Avondale. I remember a lecturer would often say to us, be my feelings what they will, Jesus is my saviour still. There's a lot of truth in that. But there's also, I think, there's a subscript to that. And the subscript is, don't trust your emotions. Could I say to you, the emotions don't give you the whole story, but they give you part of the story. They don't give you facts, but they give you a hypothesis worth investigating. Does that make sense? So my feelings are like an alert that says, hey, take notice, think about what's going on. It doesn't give you the truth necessarily. It doesn't certainly give you the whole picture, but it gives you something important. Like if the warning light goes on my car, I could say, oh, that's just a warning light, not a real problem. Yeah, I mean, that's just a light on the dash, you know. I'm sure there's plenty of water in the radiator, in the reservoir thing that tops up the radiator. Yeah, don't worry about it. But if I ignore that temperature light, if I ignore that gauge, what happens? I boil my car, I warp the block, head gasket's gone, all sorts of bad things happen. My daughter did it a few years ago. Ran the car out of water, just ignored the little things that were flashing at her. Can't be that important. So emotions matter, not because they are facts, just because I feel something doesn't make it true, but it also doesn't mean I should ignore it because it's telling me something that I need to take notice of. The basic emotions are fear, anger, sadness, and joy. When you think about it, all the other words we use for emotions can actually be grouped in one of those. How safe are your children? How safe are the children in our church to be able to express those emotions? We're not talking about hurting other people by the expression of emotions, but we are talking about appropriate expression of emotions, which usually is about talking them out rather than acting them out. And maybe this is lesson number one on emotionally intelligent parenting, is that we need to model to our kids and to train our kids to be able to talk about the emotions rather than acting out, rather than us punishing the kid for hitting her brother. Maybe we need to have a chat to them about what's going on inside that you needed to do that, and how can you deal with that feeling that you have differently rather than beating up your brother. Kids want to lash out when they are angry and they want to hit. And that's what kids do. Anger so often comes from hurt. Anger is often a secondary emotion, and hurt is the primary emotion. Because kids lash out when they're angry and hit, there's at least one good reason that I can think of for not hitting kids. The pain receptors actually produce a healing anesthetic, as I said before. Our tears even have some endorphins, feel-good chemicals in them. And if our sadness isn't taken seriously, what can sadness lead to? Just call it out. What can sadness lead to? Depression. It's the key emotion in depression, is what we look for. What we call it in psychological terms, we call it low affect, low expressed emotion, low mood, sadness. What to do when you feel angry? What do we need to train our children to do? Don't label or blame, don't put down, don't say anything you won't follow through or can't. Have you ever seen a parent or heard a parent? It wouldn't be you, of course, so it would be somebody else who might have said, "You do that again and I'll kill you." Really? Will you really kill your kid? Of course you won't. The little problem with that is next time you say to the kid, "If you do that again, there'll be consequences," you know what the clever kid does? "Well, you didn't kill me last time, so I doubt there'll be consequences this time because you said you'd kill me. You didn't kill me." Never, ever say anything that you don't intend to follow through, because otherwise your discipline doesn't mean anything. Your boundaries can easily be violated. And, you know, it's really interesting sometimes when you watch people out in public with their kids. And 6-year-old Johnny wants something, and the first mum says a very firm, assertive, "No, you can't have that." And what does Johnny do? Johnny knows exactly what to do because Johnny's smart. He's a 6-year-old. So Johnny says, "You know, if I ask 343 times, I'll get it." And Johnny can do 343. Can't count to 343, but he can nag 343 times. And what does mum do? She says, "Oh, just have the thing and shut up." You know what the most powerful reinforcement is of behavior? Partial reinforcement. I heard someone say it. Partial reinforcement. The whole gambling industry works on it. Every now and again, somebody wins lotto. Every now and again, somebody's scratch lotto ticket actually gives them $10,000. And that's all that is needed to keep a whole lot of mugs buying lottery tickets constantly, even though the chance of winning jackpots is often 1 in 15 million or something like that. Why? Occasional reinforcement. It's really, really strong motivator of behavior. So if you give in to your kid occasionally, that's a better chance that that behavior is going to grow, because the child knows, I know exactly what I need to do to get what I want. I just keep asking, and I keep asking, and I keep asking, and I just up the ante, and then I get what I want. The behavior gets reinforced. Next time it happens again. Simple operant conditioning. Use I statements about your anger. Never say to the kid, "You make me so angry. You make me so angry." Because what you're saying to the kid is, other people control my emotions, and so therefore you can use that as well, and you can say that other people made you angry. And people, and young people, are then not trained to actually take responsibility for their feelings. Much better to say, "You know, I felt pretty annoyed and probably a bit angry last night when I kept trying to ring you to see where you were and you didn't answer your phone, and you finally rock up at 12 o'clock, a good hour later than we'd agreed to, and I was also really worried, and my worry then turned to a bit of anger." That's the way we need to communicate with our kids and model that to them. What is it that causes fear in our kids? Well, let me tell you, one of the things, overprotective and overcautious parenting. We have gone from one extreme to the other. When we migrated from Austria, we landed at Roma Street railway station with our crates of stuff from Austria. 1965, we had come out on the Marconi Galileo. It had docked in Melbourne. We had got on the train. And some of you may remember the Harker family, who my parents first met at 8 Mile Plains Church on their first visit to Austria in the 50s. Became good friends of them. I remember Stan Harker, both Stan and Dulce passed away a few years ago. I remember Stan Harker putting the crates of stuff that we'd brought from Austria, there's only a few of them, putting them in the back of the farm ute, and us three children sat on top of them and went through the valley in the middle of Brisbane. I don't suggest you try that today. So we've gone from that, which was probably quite dangerous. My father would bring us to church in Nambour in the farm ute. And my father wasn't a slow driver, yeah. And we would sit at the back. Well, yeah, if there'd been any accident, probably you wouldn't have a workshop speaker this morning. We've gone from that to now being so paranoid about anything that could possibly happen to our kids. I remember talking at an inner city school, and they asked me to talk about parenting, and I said to the parents there, I said, you know, one of the best things your kids can do is learn to climb trees. And afterwards, one of the teachers said to me and said, oh, heck, you were game. I said, why? I said, these parents, that's the last thing they're ever going to let their kids do is to climb a tree. That just ain't going to happen. It's just far too risky. And yet think of the learning that happens about risk. Now, I'm not saying doing it without parenting supervision. I'm not talking about climbing a 15-metre tree. Yeah, obviously we need to be sensible. But we know that anxiety is related. One of the things that feeds anxiety with our kids is overprotective parenting. Little cartoon there. I don't know. Can you read that there, or is the writing too small? So what are some of the other parental attitudes? If we as parents believe that our job is to keep everybody happy, then we are passing that message on to our kids that they need to keep everybody happy. And I've worked with young people. I've worked, and this is often the thing with girls, but boys sometimes as well, particularly with girls, that they are so worried about keeping all of their friends at school happy. And the 16-year-old is exhausted trying to keep all her friends happy because it's so important for her to know that everybody likes her. And you know what? It's an irrational belief that everybody needs to like me. Where's the evidence that that actually works? Where's the evidence that that is reality? That everybody likes me. Not everybody liked Jesus. Not everybody liked anybody who's made any difference in our world. They were never liked by everybody. And we need to help our kids get accustomed to the fact that they're not going to get everybody's approval, and that is totally okay, and that is totally normal. And not to model to them that we need to keep everybody happy. Baggage from the past, traumatic events that have occurred that we have not dealt with can also produce attitudes that can lead to anxiety and fear in our kids. You know, one of the things that we really need to help our kids with is to learn and to make peace with the fact that the world is unfair. We didn't have a lot of money when we grew up being immigrants. We're fairly typical immigrants. My father was determined to become a farmer, but that never worked all that well. And so if we had cake at home, that was a big deal. That was a really big deal. I remember Mum would cut the cake in exactly 3 pieces. Exactly 3, so that nobody got a bigger piece. Knowing what I do now, I think what Mum should have actually done is actually cut the cake into 3 totally unequal pieces. And when one of us complained, which we would have, she should have simply said to us, life's not fair, get used to it. Because this idea that life is fair is the root of so many unhelpful reactions that we have. Think about road rage, for example. That's my belief that people on the road must drive exactly the way that I think they should drive. And if they don't, then I have got to sort them out. And I've got to wind down my window and really let them have it, because it's my job to make everybody drive fairly on the road. But if I accept that, well, life's not fair, so I expect people to cut me off in traffic, we could actually be thankful for the people that cut us off in traffic, to go, another reminder that life is not fair. Good, that's really going to help me. Call that exposure therapy. I am yet again reminded that life is not fair, and if I lower my expectations, then I'm not going to get anywhere near as angry. I might get frustrated a bit and go, oh, wish he didn't, cut me off and almost cause an accident, but it's okay, I've got brakes, my car was fitted with brakes. This idea that life must be fair causes a lot of emotional dysfunction, I believe. And part of this is that we try to rescue our kids from the natural consequences. If something happened, my wife is a school teacher, and she doesn't get it very much at her current school, but she has certainly had it at other schools, and I know other school teachers who get quite a lot of this, and some of you here may be school teachers, and you'll know what I mean. What happens, do you think, when a school teacher rings Johnny's mum and says, I need to talk to you about what Johnny's doing in class. It's not really working. He's upsetting a lot of kids. He's even bullying 1 or 2 kids. What do you think happens a lot of the time? Oh, no. I want you to know that Johnny is really being bullied in the class. And it's really not fair. And I wish you as a school would actually do something about it and look after my kid. Otherwise, I'm going to pull him out and send him to a better school. This idea that our kids can do no wrong. Like, really? And that is happening more and more. And teachers will tell you that one of the things that I hear teachers say to me regularly that discourages them from staying in the profession is the defensive reaction they often get from parents when they have to confront issues. Rather than us being secure enough within ourselves to go, if Johnny's been bad at school, that doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. It doesn't mean I've failed. It doesn't mean anything like that. It simply means he's a normal kid. That's all. It's not a terrible thing if my kid plays up at school or even gets suspended. That's all part of the learning process. Remember cheating, grade 5. I had never cheated before. Spelling test. German was my first language. In English, I've only been in Australia for about a year. I'm sitting right at the front. One thing about cheating is if you're going to cheat, don't do it when you sit at the front. Not a great idea. Sitting at the front, wooden desks in, I think it might have been Mullaney Primary School, small public school. I'm sitting there and I don't know, how to spell the words that the teacher's reading out. I turn to the person next to me and he nods his head. And that was, moves his paper over just a little bit and I copy. Well, teacher was a pretty smart bloke. Sends me straight up to the principal's office. Now, in those dark days, you know what was hanging on the wall in the principal's office, don't you? And I'm now a terrified little immigrant boy, little Austrian boy, absolutely terrified as I sit in the principal's office and I just can see the cane up there on the wall and I go, I'm going to get hurt seriously. And of course the principal starts off with how he knows my parents. And how my parents seem such nice, good, decent Christian folk. And after that lecture, and I'm in tears, I wish he'd just caned me, it would have been less painful. Never cheated again. So I suppose that worked, his talk, appealing to the better part of me. It's not such a big deal if our kids get into a bit of trouble. It doesn't mean that we've failed. And we need to not try to protect our kids from natural consequences. Imagine if this is what our kids believed about themselves. Just imagine. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? If kids could say, I'm a good person, I get on well with most people, I can usually figure things out, I know I'm God's special child, I have a good brain, I'm really creative, I like the way I look. Wow. Wouldn't that make a difference to those stats that we looked at for psychological distress and depression and anxiety? If somehow we could get those sort of messages through to our kids. Well, what do we know? What do we know about this? We know that telling kids that they're bad doesn't make them good. We know that. That doesn't work. They know they're bad. And they also believe that they can't be good. So I may as well just be good at being bad. I may as well do it really, really well. We know that everything that has happened to you is actually recorded in your brain. Everything. Now, let me give you a good example of this. Virginia Satir, well-known founder of family therapy, social worker, family therapist. She was called to the room of a girl who had her tonsils removed. Unfortunately, the bleeding hadn't stopped and she continued to bleed and the doctors were puzzled. There was no good reason for her to keep bleeding, so they call in the social worker to see if she has any clues. And Virginia Satir, being the brilliant mind that she was, she says, can you tell me what the doctors were talking about as they were operating on this girl? And they think and they go, oh, they were talking about the previous case they just operated on, and they were talking about how she wasn't going to make it. Virginia Satir said, take her back into theatre, put her under anaesthetic, and this is what I want you to say. I want you to say, this girl's doing really well. She's going to heal in no time at all. Yeah, this operation has been a total success. They said all of those things. They brought her out of anaesthetic and the bleeding stopped. Our unconscious, and I could give you more stories like that, very fascinating stories. Our unconscious is very powerful. Never think your kids aren't listening just because they're watching TV and you're there having a gripe about them to one of their siblings. Don't think that doesn't go in. Be very, very careful. We are, in a sense, we are hypnotists and we don't even know it. Messages getting through to the unconscious that we are not familiar with or that we're not aware of. We know that the kids develop resilience. They can weather the storms of life a lot better. And we know that a child's behaviour is part of the dance that the family is involved in. And one of the things that I do, if I am asked to see a 13 or 14-year-old, I want to know not just about the kid's behaviour. What I want to know is what is going on in the family. What's the family dance? What's going on in this family that this kid feels they need to act out this way in order to survive or get my attention or be noticed? What's going on in the family? What's the dance? It's 3 parenting styles that have been documented. I realise that our time is quickly running out, so let me go through as quickly as I can. Aggressive is a very reactive parenting style. You've done something wrong, so I'm going to really tell you what for. Very aggressive parenting style, a reactive parenting style. My buttons have been pushed, and boy, am I going to sort you out. A passive parenting style is where I really don't have the energy to deal with your behaviour, and I know it's not very good, but you know what? I'm just going to let it go. I'm just going to let it go. It's, I don't want to fight with you. I don't want the grief that comes from confronting you about the fact that you did something that we specifically asked you not to do. I don't want to be bothered with it. Passive parenting. We know authoritarian parenting has a direct link with better outcomes and better psychological functioning. So authoritative parenting is where I'm not reacting, I'm not punishing, but I'm disciplining. I'm not punishing, but I'm disciplining. Authoritarian is where I'm assertive. I think about what I'm going to say first. I don't just react or lash out, but there are firm boundaries. 2 ways to love that a guy called Steve Biddulph has written some great stuff about raising children. Australian psychologist, really, really like his stuff. And he makes a distinction between firm love and soft love. And he says that both are needed. He said the danger is people will either only do firm love or only do soft love. And he said we actually need both. So firm love sets the boundaries. Firm love makes sure that consequences that are spelled out to the child are always followed through. No exceptions. Always followed through. And they shouldn't be punitive. They should be redemptive. And natural consequences as much as possible. If you have looked at something inappropriate on your iPad or your computer, and the natural consequence is you don't get your computer unless you need to do schoolwork, or you only access the computer in the living room. You can't have it in the bedroom. Natural consequences make a lot more sense to kids and are better for discipline. So soft love, time is an essential ingredient. Emotional coolness on the mother's side has been shown to be a risk factor for suicide. So mothers that are detached from their child, not much hugging, not much cuddling, not much touch, always busy, focused on other things. These are parents who provide well, but there's not a lot of emotional warmth. Increases risk of suicide. Whether we know how to communicate soft love is determined by our personality and our family of origin. Was this modeled to us? How easy is it for us to show the softer side? Can we make ourselves vulnerable? These are all the things that work against the soft love, against the time, because soft love takes time and it takes emotional energy. Loving is hard work. Loving is hard work. So these are the things that really work against it. I just want to say a comment on the last one. We think the world is really unsafe. I would suggest to you it's probably more safe now than it was when I was a kid. Statistics show that child sexual assault and child abuse has not increased over the years. The only thing is we all talk about it now, and we didn't in the 50s. That's the only difference. It was happening in the 50s, it was happening in the 60s. And I would say in some ways the world is actually safer in that kind of a way. It's unsafe in other ways, in media influences and so forth. But with that kind of stuff, it's actually safer. We wear seatbelts. We don't put kids in the back of utes anymore and drive 120 kilometres an hour on a single lane road. We don't do that stuff anymore because we know it's not safe. And so as parents, we need to just loosen up a little bit sometimes. What are the characteristics of firm love? Firm love doesn't hit, blame or harm, but it is firm, it has boundaries, and it acts early before you lose control. Before you lose control, before those chemicals kick in, the fight and flight chemicals, particularly the fight ones with our kids, which is we're going to take them on, we're going to win this battle, I'm going to show you. Yeah, I'm going to teach you a lesson. It doesn't take things personally. It uses techniques of stand and think about it, rather than just reaction. Biddulph also makes a helpful distinction between firm parents and mush parents. Parents who do soft love really well, but they don't do firm love, and he calls them mush parents. I like the way that Biddulph breaks psychology down into the really easy understandable. And he does that particularly well, being a family psychologist and an Aussie. I'm sure that helps him. Have a read of those. A few of you have asked if you can get a copy of these presentations. I will give them to Paul Goltz as a PDF, and so he will no doubt find a way, being the clever man he is. Where are you, Paul? No, he's run away. Can you guys make sure that this is available for people who would like a copy of it? Sorry, mate, I didn't. Okay, so there's a website where they can download this from? Okay, thanks. Just a few more things. My spouse matters, but not as much as my kids. That's mush parenting. Do you know families that are totally child-centered? Everything revolves around that. We have some friends who will remain nameless in Adventist circles. But whenever we ask them to hang out with us, we know what they've got to do first. They've got to check with their kids. They've got to check what the kids are doing. My wife and I joke about it now. We go, yeah, they'll have to check with so-and-so to get permission to come and see us. Child-centered families are not healthy families because they give the children the false idea that the world revolves around them. That, matched with the natural narcissism of the adolescent years, is not a good combination. Our kids need to realize that they're important, but the world doesn't revolve around them because it doesn't revolve around any of us. In contrast, my partner and our marriage are very important. The kids come in equal first. Life is challenging, but fun. Life is easier if kids learn to behave well. As an adult, I am the one in charge. I run this show. So, back to our video. Back to our video where we started this morning. Do you know that 37 million people watched that video? And do you know how people can react to YouTube videos? 500,000 people liked it, thought it was great. Only 47,000 disliked it, thought there was a problem with it. That scares me. 500,000 people think that this is okay for a parent to do. Why should you not shoot your child's computer and put it on Facebook? Let me tell you why. Because in the interaction, there was no adult present. The parent had left the room. There was just two adolescents. That's all. Because the dad was being exactly the same. And you might remember that he actually talks about the bad language that his daughter uses, and he himself uses bad language. So you've got two adolescents, you've got two children, there is no parent left in the room. Shame is a key emotion involved in depression, and he is trying to shame his kid into doing the right thing. Shame should never be a way of disciplining. Fear is a key emotion involved in anxiety, and he threatens her. He threatens you're not going to have a computer, you're not going to have a phone, and he threatens a lot of stuff that he actually can't follow through, because how on earth can this kid finish high school with no access to a computer? Good luck with that one. He's going to have to back down on that. So again, he is threatening stuff he can't follow through. What he displayed was disrespect that matched the disrespect of Hannah to her parents. Just as Hannah's disrespectful to her parents, so he's now disrespectful to her. And two wrongs never, ever make a right. It's not how it works. Never threaten anything that you don't plan to enact. Parents are the ones to give an example of how to deal with emotions appropriately. And he gives an example of how to be spiteful, how to be revengeful, how to get even. Not a great example of a combination of firm love and soft love, which I believe is warranted in our parenting. I do want to wish you all the very best in the difficult task of parenting. Some of you here are no doubt involved as grandparents. I'm at the grandparent stage. It's also a fun stage, different way of parenting. Some boundaries, not quite as many, but we watch the parenting of our children, don't we? And we go, oh, don't do that. And we know we can't say too much, and can we say anything at all? And it gets tricky business. I do want to wish you all the very best and much of God's blessing. Do we have any questions? We probably have time for one or two quick questions. Look
Any
at that,
questions?
I've confused everybody.
Here we go. We've got one over here.
I was just thinking of one of the earlier slides about, I think it was like psychological problems now, that it has increased a lot. Do you think that also is because we have more focus on it nowadays than before?
No, probably not, because yes, you would say that if you went back to statistics from the 90s, yes. But in 2012, we're already talking a lot about this stuff. So the fact that, what's scary for me is the fact that it's in the recent past that it's increased. If you went, it's increased from the 80s, I would say, okay, we have better ways of detecting it, we're doing more research in this area. But substantially, it hasn't changed that much in 10 years, so I think the statistics likely do actually reflect a greater level of distress in our adolescents.
Anyone else has a question? Just put your hand up. Yep, wait, on the other side.
This is your exercise, mate.
It is.
It's good for you.
Oh, thank you.
I come from a family where conflict was never really, didn't happen in front of us.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if you've got any suggestions for how I now show to my own kids that conflict is actually necessary and healthy and something that they need to learn how to do.
Excellent question, because I've had clients who are so terrified of conflict, and people come in for couples therapy, they have no idea how to have a good, clean fight with their partner because they never saw it modelled. So I would argue that conflict between parents, as long as it stays respectful, as long as it's none of the four horsemen that we talked about yesterday, criticism and stonewalling and contempt and that kind of stuff, I think if it's done without scaring the kids, and if the kids are reassured, hey, mummy and daddy love each other deeply, but sometimes we don't see things the same way, and that's totally okay, I think that reassurance is needed. But I think if it's going to escalate, then that's going to have to happen elsewhere because kids get scared. But I think if we can do it without escalating, and if we can have a strong, assertive disagreement, like for us, we don't have kids living at home anymore, obviously, but Jill and I, as I described to you yesterday, we're quite different in many ways, and we will have some vigorous discussions, and some of them happen in front of our close friends that we feel safe enough to. They're never disrespectful, but our friends find it really amusing because we have friends that just never argue, yeah, while we're very good at arguing. But we feel safe enough with our friends, and we know how to contain it, and we know where the limits are, that we can do some of that even in front of our friends. And I think that's a healthy thing. And they look at our relationship and go, well, okay, these guys do it a little bit differently than we do, and that's totally okay as well. You know, we're both strong and stubborn and willful, so, yeah.
Do we have a third one? Just one more? No? All right. Well, looks like I really enjoyed that, Paul. That was good. How many of us really enjoyed that Paul's presentation this morning? Fantastic. Thank you so much. And once again, if you want his PowerPoint slide, come and see Paul or myself. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that, Paul. Ta-ta. All right, just a couple of housekeeping. If we've got some slides, if later you can put the slides up on the screen. Don't forget that next week, tomorrow, not next week. Tomorrow, our workshop continues, and we've got 3 presenters presenting, and I think we're going to be talking about AI. So AI has been in the news, and you've probably heard about it. So we've got 3 presenters that are going to be talking about that. Sorry? From Burn the Haystack. All right. So don't forget also we've got speed friending. Yeah, so that's happening tomorrow. We started that last night, and we'll continue that tonight. Sorry. And also, don't forget. Also, tonight after Giovanni's presentation, we've got Anna, and she'll be singing and doing her thing down there at the little cafe place. Don't forget, we've got Giovanni Living in the Miraculous. That continues on tonight at 7 p.m. We've had some great feedback, and if you haven't heard him, please come and listen to what he has to say. So once again, thank you so much. We've got Paul, one announcement. Yep.
So what we do know is life doesn't always go how we expect, and there are blended families in our churches and communities. With that in mind, if you're on the south side, Metho, who is the counsellor at BAC, and Sally Watson Hall, who both of them have a Master of, hold on, I'll get what their thing is. So a Master of Ministry majoring in family, and I think Metho has just finished his Master of Family Therapy. They'll be talking about blended families and how you can parent and I know it's a difficult space, and more power to you. If you know somebody or would like to do that, that's on October 7 at 2 o'clock over at Springwood. So just if you're Southside, it's a good way to network and to kind of help each other through that time. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. Well, that brings an end to today's workshop. Thank you so much for coming along. Don't forget, tomorrow we have another workshop at 9:30, but join us tonight at 7 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your day. God bless.